Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us at the Arca ESG Fireside Chat Series. With me today, I have Christine Sandler, Head of Sales and Marketing from Fidelity Digital, and we'll actually be flipping the script today. Christine will be interviewing me, so I'm really excited about this, and welcome, Christine.
Thanks for having me, Rain. This is exciting. It's also a new opportunity for me to kind of ask the questions instead of being asked, which is great. So shall we get started?
By all means, it's your show.
Okay.
Take it away.
All right. Okay. So Rain, over the course of this exploration, you've spoken with, a variety of industry participants. Is there anything that surprised you kind of along the way as you got deeper into the topic of ESG exploration as it relates to digital assets?
Yes, I think you make an excellent point. I've done this a few times now with quite a few people in the industry, like a wide sampling. And what I've actually been most surprised with, and maybe I shouldn't have been, was the depth and thoughtfulness that people had been approaching their ESG efforts with. At Arca, we're constantly trying to talk about a thoughtful approach, a narrative, not necessarily saying digital assets are ESG positive or not, but just encouraging people to be thoughtful in their approach and not a check the box ESG. Everybody I've spoken to has been incredibly thoughtful on these issues, very deep thinking, very, very thoughtful about the implications of decentralized governance, the both pros and cons of some of the environmental discussion. So I was just pleasantly surprised that people were approaching it so thoughtfully and seriously. It was just very, I guess, heartwarming, one could say.
That's great. That's great. We found that as well. We found that although the discussion was pretty diverse, that there were a lot of thoughtful expressions of interest around the subject. We also found that like ESG was a major headline grabber in 2021. Do you think that ESG will continue to be a key area of focus in 2022, or do you think it'll evolve as the dialogue evolves into a different type of discussion?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. It's hard to say what is going to grab, traction in headlines. And as you know, we're in a very almost this digital assets, even more so than probably the traditional world, meme and narrative driven and slightly insular and echo chambery. So you don't really know kind of what idea or thought is going to get traction or how it's going to kind of reverberate around our space. So the ESG narrative and a lot had to do with environmental, a big megaphone from somebody like an Elon Musk driving discussions around the environment and energy usage side, but then that really led to more thoughtful discussions. So it's hard to see like what's going to drive that, but I think social impact, the core messages of ESG, those things are going to come to the fore when like you're seeing, stories like, I think it was in the Times the other day, they did a story on, the race for crypto mayors, where, Eric Adams and Suarez are duking it out to be America's digital asset or crypto mayor. But there is an interesting underlying implication that digital assets can be used, for societal good, not just in our space, but, broader at a municipal basis or a city basis. So I think we're going to see more stories like that. And so a more diverse impact investing narrative and not so dominated by one thing or the other, but it's hard to tell how it would develop.
That really leads well into my next question. My next question is really around that it seems to me that the ESG narrative really did pick up along with kind of a diversity in terms of the types of investors we started to see in the space or types of use cases we started to see in the space. What role, if any, do you think education in the industry, within the industry at all, could play in terms of the evolution of that narrative? Like, where does ESG go from here?
Sure. Oh yeah. I would say the question is about education and how education is going to drive that.
drive it, but also maybe shape kind of the ESG focus. I think one of the things we think about is that there seems to be a tremendous focus on the E part, and maybe less of a narrative on the S and the G.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it's kind of a little bit of a microcosm for digital assets in general. You know this from the work that you do, that a lot of what we're doing is really missionary educational work around digital assets. There's not a central repository or authority on even definitional, nomenclature, taxonomy, all of those things. So that's at a very high level. The digital asset ecosystem suffers from it's both a bug and a feature. You have a decentralized nature of it, which is great and robust, but okay, what do we agree on the terms and what this is? So that's digital assets in general, and then kind of the same thing with ESG. And what we're finding both on our institutional asset efforts as well as how we're talking about ESG, it's all about education, and it's all about really giving people the sources, tools, information to form their own opinions, but at least they have, we've started to gain trust through interactions that we're honest brokers about this. We're really trying to give our LPs, who are either fiduciaries of their own money or fiduciaries of other people's money, but also fiduciaries of that idea of what they're trying to accomplish with ESG things, the information that they need. There's just a lot of confusing narratives out there and sources. So we're trying to present them with the best and clearest, like curated, but not trying to drive them to any particular conversation. So I think that that's going to be huge. And that people, like Fidelity, like yourselves, that are educating people on what these assets are, even if it's not even in a direct ESG sense, just what they do, then people are able to form their own opinions. Oh, the decentralized governance thing that democratizes financial services, that could have a societally positive impact, and kind of, draw their own conclusions on this stuff. So education is key. There's a lot more basic, fundamental education about this than you would imagine. And as you know, we have a lot of retail interest, right? This was a retail-driven adoption first, which is just unusual for a financial service offering, and we had institutions lagging behind. So institutions are in the kind of interesting seat of catching up on some of these things to either the retail or the technological public. So a lot of education, and I think it will definitely drive the way people think about ESG, still in a very evolutionary, like bottoms up way, not a top down way, but that's just the nature of the space.
I think that's great. I love the way you drew the parallel between the open source nature of the information that's out there and being kind of that funnel to curate the appropriate resources. So, and look, we get a lot of questions about this topic, and I'm sure you get a ton of questions from a diverse set of investors and participants. Without taking a position on ESG, how do you recommend that investors weigh these considerations and think about ESG holistically within the framework of their approach to digital assets?
Sure. I think it's important. We use ESG kind of like as a catch-all term, right? And it comes out of environmental, social, and governance type of investing, but it's a shorthand for impact investing. And that I think what people have to first do is really define what they're trying to accomplish, or what they're trying to do. If all they're trying to do is say that they are checking off, an ESG box, that's fine too. But then you're going to have to dive deep on each project and understand what they are saying. What do they mean by this as an ESG fund? What do they mean by a governance aspect to this? So you have to do that. So you have to figure out what's going on. If you do it your approach, like ESG and impact investing is important to me, but what's really the most important to me? Okay, the environment. All right, the environment is the most important to me. What is the implications of digital assets around environment? Okay, there's this idea of energy usage, but what are we replacing? So then you can start to dig in and do the research on what's important to you, and actually find, direct sources and talk to people and dig through it. But if you're just kind of like, I want something societally beneficial or positive. It's just too loose, like a mandate on yourself to find the things that are important to you and do the work. So I say, if you define the things that are important to you and what you're trying to accomplish as an investor, there's ways then to dig in on each of these things. There's ways to think about the environment. There's ways to think about societal impact of digital assets, and then there's ways to think about governance. And they're very specific. And when you get into it, they're quite nuanced. So it's not, when we say we're neither pro nor against this concept of digital assets as ESG, that's serious.
Mhm.
A hammer can be used as a tool and a weapon. These things are not clear, and it's how we implement them is important. So the devil is in the details. So I encourage people to really, dig in on those things. So that's what I would
That's
say.
great.
Dig in and define your goals.
That's great. That's great. Um, we find that many investors are really keenly focused on the environmental piece. What do you think might be missing from that conversation today? And is there perhaps a common misconception that you think maybe constricts or impedes the dialogue on that specific subject?
Yeah, I do. And I think I have different feelings about this now, and it probably has actually informed the way I think about the E and ESG investing since being so close to digital assets. So to watch a narrative, and this is shorthand or a summary of really what it is that there's concerns about the amount of energy used in proof of work digital asset ecosystems, mainly Bitcoin. And so large numbers about the energy used to secure the Bitcoin network, and usually phrased in the terms of as much energy as Ireland uses, or something like
Mm.
this.
Every
Um,
washing machine in the world,
right,
exactly.
exactly. And these stats can be both true and misleading when we think about them. So very rarely, when we're talking about any other economic endeavor or some sort of thing, do we immediately focus on the energy usage. Like, it's not like we have gone around and we're like, well, I wonder what the energy usage of the traditional incumbent financial system is, or how much power it uses or resources it takes to pay like 150,000 financial service employees, or something like that. So I don't think it's a very constructive way to just look at it as an absolute term, just like you probably wouldn't, gauge any other industry purely on the energy usage. You'd probably think, okay, what is the societal beneficial impact of this? Okay, what are the alternatives for how we're using it? What are their energy footprints? So I have no problem with these type of discussions, and I think that they're very important. But I think that if you don't go below the surface, and this is what I mean by it's informed the way I've looked at other ideas on the environment. We have these very binary tribal things. So if you don't think Bitcoin's a good idea or think it's a fraud or whatever, there's probably no amount of energy that you would think is a good use on
Exactly.
it, right? And if you're a Bitcoin maximalist and think it's the best thing since sliced bread, you would probably think infinite energy towards it. So, you know, which one is true? You really have to dig into these things and think about them a little bit more than this very black and white thing is what I've learned from that. So that again, education, dig in deeper. It's very hard to get your information on ESG and anything from Twitter or memes or Elon Musk or anything like that. If you're serious about the environment on it, there's information about this stuff. Dig in, call us, we'll talk about it.
That's great. That's great. Um, so, Rain, as we look back on the series, is there a question that you didn't ask or someone that you didn't get to talk to that maybe you wish you had?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Um, I think it would be interesting, and I know nobody can talk to him, but just as an idea, when we talk about ESG and just ESG having um, such a powerful narrative around the E and specifically on Bitcoin, I think a pseudo-anonymous interview with Satoshi would be quite interesting on a thought experiment of, when the Genesis block was created and you embedded, a newspaper headline about Bank of England increasing, their basically their TARP. what was your idea of the environmental impact of things, or is there an appropriate level to that? So I think some of the creators, the true people that were talking about the idea, because when it was the idea, it was still separated from other things in reality. What considerations for environmental impact were there? How do you think about that? That's one of the things that's so interesting about digital assets, Bitcoin specifically, is it was we still don't know who invented it. It's code that lives on its own, maintained proactively and voluntarily by like the largest interconnected group of computers working to like a common purpose that's ever really occurred. That's incredible. But when we think about those things also, I think it's a legitimate question. When you have something like that's autonomous, lives on its own, grows on its own, what if there is a massive environmental impact that is unforeseen or untold? How does a distributed system where there is no real Satoshi, the CEO, and I can tell you, anybody that's wondering out there, CEOs don't have as much power to do everything that they want to as you think, but decentralized governance and the running of those things is also very wild too. How do we deal with very serious considerations like that? And I think you see that all the way through the digital asset ecosystem. Things about governance. We want to talk about leveling societal playing fields and equality and things like that, but you still see issues within digital assets. So it's really about implementation of these things. It's not a tool that fixes them all, but I would like to talk to Satoshi on a bunch of things. I think it would be interesting if we found Satoshi and talked to him about ESG. Wouldn't be
I'd like
expecting
to
that.
join you for that chat, for sure. For sure.
Great. We can do it together, our joint fireside chat, Christine.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Rain, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to really to pursue this endeavor and also indulge me with these questions. Really, this is a really valuable exercise for investors and participants in the space. So really grateful for this.
Oh, Christine, thank you so much for flipping the script on us. This was really fun. I've asked all these questions, and it's interesting to have to think about it in this seat. And I'm really glad that we did it this way. Thanks for having us, and thanks for everything you guys do at Fidelity.
It's our pleasure.
All right. See you soon.
See ya.